Well, my wife and I got married almost 12 years ago, which means that we started dating almost 13 years ago, which means I started trying to work it with her about 14 years ago. And I've shared this story at Breakaway before, but believe it or not, there was a time in our history where Catherine was just not that into this. And I know that's really hard for you to believe. I still don't get it at times, but there was a time where she just wasn't that into this. But I will never forget this time before we were dating where I was on a phone call with Catherine and we were just talking, and somehow in the midst of our conversation, I convinced her to watch a movie with me that night. And it caught me so off guard that she agreed to watch a movie with me that I got off the phone and I automatically went and changed. Because I didn't want to just look fine. Like, I wanted to look fist-biting fine. You know what I'm talking about? Like, that's what I was going for. And I know some of you are like, that's really not possible for you. Well, I was going to try for it anyway. And so I go and I start getting ready and I look in the mirror and the clothes look good, the spike is spiky, and so I'm ready to go, and I get in the car and I begin to make my way over to her apartment, and I'm just fighting off pitters like crazy as I'm on the way over there. And as I'm driving to her apartment, I can't help but dream. I mean, we are talking about the Catherine Robinson, people, and so I begin to dream about what could be. And so I just begin to think, oh my gosh, this is great. I'm about to watch a movie with the Catherine Robinson. And if this ends up going well, who knows? Like, what if I can actually take her on an official nice date? And what if we actually start dating? These are thoughts that begin to roll through my mind. And so as I'm driving, I just think, you know what? I'm going to call her. And I just want to show her that I'm fun, I'm thoughtful, spontaneous. So I called her and I said, hey, can I pick you up some ice cream on the way over for you to eat while you watch the movie? And she informed me of two things on that phone call. She, number one, told me that she didn't want any ice cream. And number two, she informed me that she had also invited her friend Katie to join us. Gentlemen in the room, I want you to know that that phone call began what would be a night-long lesson of me learning that if you want to ask a girl out, you just need to call her up and ask her out and make your intentions very, very clear. Because the way things played out was I got to her apartment and Catherine spent the majority of the night in the other room talking to a different guy on the phone who actually asked her out. The good news is after she got off the call, us three girls were able to sit around and debrief about how things went. I am telling you, people, that night, my dreams and reality went in two totally different directions. Like, I dreamed of being Catherine's man, and I ended up her gal pal. That's how things played out. And the reason that I start off and I tell you that tonight is because I just wonder if that in some ways describes what your season of life has felt like in some ways. Maybe that's how your past few weeks or your past few months or your past few years have really felt. Maybe your life hasn't gone at all how you thought that it should go. Maybe your dreams or your plans in reality have gone in two totally different directions. Some of you, if you are honest tonight, you're already ready for this semester to be over. Like, you're ready for a redo. You're ready to hit the reset button. You're ready for the spring because the spring has to be better than how this fall has already gone for you. Maybe you're sitting there thinking, man, Rush didn't go at all like I thought that it would go. Maybe you're looking at your roommate situation and it makes your life miserable. Maybe you're lonely. You are painfully lonely. Maybe a loved one is sick. Maybe someone close to you has passed away. Maybe you can't put your finger on it. Maybe you can't pinpoint what it is. You just know that you haven't felt yourself for a long time. You've felt down. You've felt depressed. And you just don't know what's going on. And so your dreams, your plans, and your reality have gone in two totally different directions. What we're going to do tonight together is we're going to step into a story in the scriptures where we're going to see this group of friends experience just that. Their plans in reality are going to go in two totally different directions. And as we look at this story, what I'm going to do is I'm going to give you 4 truths that you need to know that are going to help you navigate your way to peace when life is painful, uncomfortable, frustrating, and disappointing. And so if that's where you find yourself tonight, I just want to invite you to open with me tonight to Mark chapter 4. Mark chapter 4 is where we're going to be tonight. Mark chapter 4, we're looking at a story that takes place in verses 35 through 41. And so let me just read you the whole story right now, and then we'll talk about it. It says this: On that day, when evening had come, he said to them, "Let us go across to the other side." In leaving the crowd, they took him with them in the boat just as he was, and other boats were with him. And a great windstorm arose, and the waves were breaking into the boat so that the boat was already filling. But he was in the stern, asleep on the cushion. And they woke him and said to him, "Teacher, do you not care that we are perishing?" And he awoke and rebuked the wind and said to the sea, "Peace, be still." Those are our 3 words. And the wind ceased, and there was a great calm. He said to them, "Why are you so afraid? Have you still no faith?" And they were filled with great fear and said to one another, "Who then is this that even the wind and the sea obey him?" So let's just all get on the same page. What's happening here? Jesus and his friends decide to go across the Sea of Galilee. Jesus gets on the boat and decides to take a nap. Jesus' friends step onto the boat believing that they're just taking a normal, average, everyday ride on the Sea of Galilee. And what ends up happening is they end up in the middle of an "I think we are going to die" type of storm. Now, I want you to think about who is on the boat. These are people who have left everything to follow Jesus. These are people who have left everything to follow Jesus, and the reason that they are on that boat is because Jesus had the idea to go across to the other side. So after these men leave everything to follow Jesus, and after these men get on a boat simply because Jesus says, "Let's go to the other side," how crazy is it that these men who have left everything to follow Jesus and gotten on a boat because Jesus wanted them to get on the boat find themselves in a storm that is an "I think we are going to die" type of storm. And that leads me to the first truth that you need to know when your plans in reality go in 2 totally different directions. The first truth that you need to know is this: don't expect smooth waters on an unpredictable sea, even with Jesus. Don't expect smooth waters on an unpredictable sea, even with Jesus. What you need to know is that the Sea of Galilee sits about 700 feet below sea level, but it's surrounded by hills and mountains, and often the cold air from the mountains conflicts with the warm air coming off of the sea. And what happens is often that there are sudden and violent storms that can arise on the sea. And so it was not uncommon for there to be massive storms on the sea. And so these men hop onto a boat with Jesus because he says he wants to go across to the other side. And here these men find themselves in an "I think we are going to die" type of storm. Why? Why is that the case? Because smooth waters on an already unpredictable sea are never a promised perk of following Jesus. Recently, I stumbled upon this app called VidAngel. I don't know if you've ever heard of this app. If you're not familiar with it, that's fine. But I've got an 8-year-old or a 9-year-old and a 6-year-old boy. We've also got an 11-month-old, but he doesn't know what's going on in life. So I've got a 9-year-old and a 6-year-old that are obsessed with dinosaurs right now. So all they've wanted to do is watch the old Jurassic Park movies. And I don't know if you've seen those, but there is some interesting content in these movies because it's dinosaurs against man, okay? And so the beauty of this app called VidAngel is you can stream the movie through this app and you can filter anything out of the movie that you want. So you can just click on all of the cuss words and they just disappear from the movie. Like someone will be talking on the movie and then the show will just go mute whenever they cuss. Or like anytime a dinosaur kills a person, the scene just changes. So like if you've ever seen the original Jurassic Park, there's this time where this guy frantically gets out of a Jeep and runs into a bathroom. And then he's sitting there on a stall with his pants down, and in the real thing, the T-Rex comes and it's game over. But as far as my kids know, this guy just having a really bad day, and for all we know, he is still stuck on that toilet because the scene just changed, and I edited that baby out. And I think about that, and I'm like, that's the kind of life that we want and expect as followers of Jesus Christ. We want Jesus to, in some ways, edit out all of the bad aspects of life. All of the times in life that might be disappointing, all of the times in life that might bring pain, what we want and what we deep down expect is a life that's full of comfort and convenience, where life feels in control. The problem is that there isn't an app for that. And the problem is that is not how Jesus operates. That's not reality. It's not reality at all. In ancient cultures and in ancient legends, it's interesting because the sea was a symbol for chaos and unavoidable destruction. And you actually see this in the Bible. Like if you were to go and read the book of Revelation, you would see in Revelation chapter 13 that there is this crazy weird beast that arises from what? He arises from the sea. And then if you were to look in Revelation chapter 21, right after Jesus does away with Satan once and for all in Revelation chapter 20, Revelation 21 starts by saying this. It says, "Then I saw a new heaven and a new earth, for the first heaven and the first earth had passed away." And watch this, "and the sea was no more." Why? Because the sea was a symbol for the unavoidable pain in devastation in this world. The reason that I need you to know this is because life in this world is a life lived at sea. That's what life in this world is like. Life in this world is a life lived at sea. This world is full of chaos and unpredictable, unstoppable, unavoidable pain and devastation. This is a world packed full of things like cancer and disease and fatal car accidents and abuse and slavery and mass shootings and cheating and on and on and on. This is why Jesus never promises you your best life now. He never promises you your best life now because this is a life lived at sea. What does Jesus tell us? Instead, Jesus promises us that there will be storms in this life. Look at what Jesus says in John 16:33. He says this, "I've told you these things so that in me you may have peace. In this world you will have trouble." He just spells it out. He says, guys, I want you to be clear. In this world, you will have trouble. But take heart, I have overcome the world. What is Jesus saying? He's saying, do not expect smooth waters on an already unavoidable and unpredictable sea. Do not expect that. Now, why is this something that we desperately need to hear? The reason that we really need to hear this and get our minds around the fact that we should not expect smooth waters on an already unpredictable sea is because many people in here long to be in control of life. Like the good majority of us in here, if we were honest, we are control freaks. Like, let's just by show of hands, who's willing to admit in this place tonight that you are a control freak? Okay, everyone raising your hand, you're not a control freak. The people who are control freaks are the people who didn't raise their hands because you need to control your image right now. And so you don't want people thinking that you're really a control freak. Y'all are the control freaks. But we are people who desperately need to be in control of every aspect of our lives. We need to control our appearance. We need to control our weight. We need to control our GPA. We need to control our likability. We need to control our involvement at school. We need to control our relationship status. We need to control our rooming situation for next year. We need to control what we are going to be doing for an internship or a job this year. We need to control what we're going to be doing for our lives, even though we're only freshmen and we've still got 4 or 5 years to figure that out. But we need to have every aspect of our lives under control. If you're a control freak in here, then you have to love the fact that Jesus actually led his friends into a situation where they have zero control. You have to love that. Like, Jesus isn't the one who started the storm because he's never the originator of evil, but he did lead his friends into the storm. You need to know that life will be full of times where you have zero control. And storms will absolutely come. But storms should never upset your faith. Storms should actually increase your faith. Why? Because Jesus Christ is committed to being in the boat of your life. And Jesus Christ wants to sustain you and show you his goodness and kindness in the midst of your storms. But let's be clear from the beginning, do not expect smooth waters on an already unpredictable sea. The second truth that you need to know when you find yourself in a time when your dreams, your plans, and reality are going in two totally different directions is this: a lack of response does not equal a lack of care. A lack of response does not equal a lack of care. What you need to realize is that this story that we're looking at tonight is a story all about whether God cares about you or not. That's what this story is about. At the heart of this story is a question from Jesus' friends to him. And what's their question? As the boat fills with water and their souls fill with stress and anxiety, they run to Jesus. And what do they say? They say, "Do you not care that we are perishing?" See, this is a story about whether Jesus Christ really cares about what is going on in your life or not. And that's why I love the Bible. Because this was written 2,000 years ago, but it still gets us. Like, if you're at a point in your life where you've been asking questions like, God, where were you? God, why didn't you show up? God, why didn't you do something? God, why aren't you doing something? These are all questions about the care of Jesus. What you're actually questioning is, does Jesus Christ care about me or not? The Bible gets you. The Bible understands right where you're at right now. If you're at a place in life where you're kind of questioning the care of God, if you find yourself in a moment or season where you're asking these kind of questions, here's what I want to encourage you to do. Instead of focusing on what Jesus didn't do or isn't doing, I want to encourage you to focus on what Jesus has done and what he will do. If you really want to know if Jesus cares about you, all you have to do is take a little bit of time to stop focusing on what he didn't do or isn't doing, and instead focusing on what he has done or will do. What has Jesus done? Well, Jesus Christ left heaven for you. Jesus Christ was crucified as a criminal for you. Jesus Christ endured the wrath of God for you. Jesus Christ rose victoriously from the grave for you. If you're a believer in Jesus Christ, if you've given your life to Jesus, if you've expressed faith in Jesus Christ for the forgiveness of your sins, then what Jesus Christ has done is he's permanently dealt with the storm of sin that was raging in your life, threatening to separate you from God for all of eternity. And he's brought a great calm to that area of your life. That's what Jesus Christ has done. If you ever wonder if Jesus Christ really cares about you, all you have to do is look at what he's done. All you have to do is look at the cross. My friend and the founding director of Breakaway, Pastor Greg Mott, I love what he said when he was talking about the cross. He said, even if Jesus Christ never gave you another thing, he's already given you too much. Because of what he has given you through his death, burial, and resurrection on the cross. Just look at what he's done. But don't just look at what he's done. Look at what he will do. Look at what Revelation 21:5 says. It says this, and he who was seated on the throne, that's Jesus. Here's what he said. He said, behold, I am making all things new. This is what Jesus is doing. And we just saw in Revelation 21:1 that there's going to be a new heaven and a new earth, and the sea will be no more. That means that a day is coming where Jesus will deal finally with all of the chaos and all of the unavoidable pain and devastation in this world. That means that a day is coming where hurricanes will be no more, cancer will be no more, breakups will be no more, rejection will be no more, depression will be no more, loneliness will be no more. Jesus will deal with all of these things. This is what he's going to do, and he's promised us in John chapter 14 that he's gone to prepare a place for all of those who would put their faith and trust in Jesus Christ. He's gone to prepare a place for us, and a day is coming where he will come and take us to where he is, and we will spend all of eternity enjoying the fullness and joy that comes from being in his presence. Now follow me on this. When you think about what Jesus has done and what he will do, it isn't that far-fetched to begin to believe that if Jesus has done something and will do something, then there's a possibility that Jesus is doing something now. Here's what I need you to understand. Just because you can't see Jesus doing something doesn't mean Jesus isn't doing something. See, a lack of response does not equal a lack of care. And that brings me to the third truth that you need to know. When your dreams or your plans in reality go in two totally different directions, Jesus takes storms that seem pointless and he makes them productive. You see that? Jesus takes storms that seem pointless and makes them productive. Look back at verse 41. After Jesus calms the storm, here's the disciples' response. It says this in verse 41. It says this, and they were filled with great fear and said to one another, who then is this that even the wind and the sea obey him? Do you see what's going on here? In case you haven't read the book of Mark, in the previous chapters of Mark, the disciples have been acclimating to who Jesus is and what he has authority over. And so Jesus has shown them in earlier chapters that he has authority in his teaching, and he's shown them that he has authority over evil spirits and over all different types of sicknesses. But now for the first time, the disciples are seeing that Jesus Christ even has authority over nature. And so what this shows us is that the disciples are getting to see Jesus move and work in a way that they would have never gotten to see him move and work if the storm hadn't actually come. And so what's the response? It creates this greater reverential awe inside of the disciples. And we talked about this on the first night of the semester. Your view of Jesus determines your response to Jesus. So Jesus, through the storm, he's taking something that seems pointless and he's making it productive. He is working in the disciples' lives, showing them more about who he is, and it's driving a greater response to him. Now, what I want to do is I just want to identify three ways that I believe I see God working to take storms that seem pointless and make them productive. The first way that I see God at work is he's cultivating intimacy in those people who are in the middle of a storm. I want you to think about possibly the most famous chapter in all of Scripture. It's It's Psalm 23. Let's just read together the first 4 verses of Psalm 23. It's a Psalm of David. And David says, "The Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want." Now watch the language. He says this: "He makes me lie down in green pastures. He leads me beside still waters. He restores my soul. He leads me in paths of righteousness for his name's sake." Now David begins to talk about the storm that he's in. He refers to his storm as a valley. He says this: "Even though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil." Why? "For you are with me. Your rod and your staff, they comfort me." Do you see the switch from third person to second person? In the first 3 verses, he's like, he leads me. He leads me. He restores my soul. But then when David finds himself in a storm, when he's walking through the valley of the shadow of death, he says, "I will fear no evil." Why? "For you are with me." The switch in person comes. Why? Because the storm in David's life, the valley in David's life, has become a breeding ground for intimacy with God. When you find yourself in a storm and when you look to Jesus for your hope, what ends up happening is you begin to experience Jesus in ways that you would never experience if that storm hadn't come. You'd never ask for the storm, but God takes that storm and uses it for good in your life. This week I was talking with one of our Breakaway volunteers. And she was just sharing her story with a group of students, and I happened to have the privilege of sitting with this group of students. And her story is that she was raised with some Jewish influence. And she grew up in some ways just kind of mocking the church and in Jesus, but during her freshman year here at A&M, she was searching and she began to learn about Jesus. And toward the end of her freshman year here at A&M, her dad got sick and went into the hospital for 9 months and then ended up passing away. And here's what she said about her experience with her dad passing away. She said this is one of your peers here at A&M, a Breakaway volunteer now. She said this, she says, "That day in the hospital room, the day he died, I felt this weird strength and peace. And I knew that everything was going to be okay. I was thankful for what God did. I felt peace in the hospital room. I felt God's presence in the hospital room. It was the hardest moment of my life, but it was also life-changing. I finally found the fulfillment I've always been looking for." So you know what Jesus did is he took that storm that might have seemed pointless and he made it productive. And Jesus worked through that storm to really introduce himself to this girl. And now she's a passionate follower of Jesus Christ, wanting to really tell the world about him through her pain and through her story, because God used the storm to cultivate intimacy between him and her. The second way that I see God taking storms that seem pointless and making them productive is he's using storms to lead people to freedom from fear. He's using storms to lead people to freedom from fear. It's interesting. Peter was one of the people that was in the boat in this story. And some people believe it's actually Peter's eyewitness account that Mark is retelling in his gospel. And I love what we see Peter doing in Acts chapter 12. You don't have to turn there, but here's how the story goes. Peter gets put in prison. And King Herod is about to put Peter to death. And so Peter now finds himself in a different type of storm, just like he was on the boat in a storm where he thought his life was on the line. Now he's in a different type of storm where he believes that his life is on the line. And look at what we see him doing in Acts chapter 12, verse 6. It says this: "Now when Herod was about to bring him out, to do what? To kill him. On that very night, Peter was sleeping between 2 soldiers, bound with 2 chains, and sentries before the door were guarding the prison." Do you see it? After Peter denied Jesus 3 times, Jesus appeared to him and was like, "Peter, man, you follow me." And Peter took him so seriously that he thought back to that time that he was on the boat in a different storm and Jesus just slept like a baby on that cushion. And Peter was like, "I guess that's what you're supposed to do when you're about to die." You're supposed to sleep. And so Peter gets chained to two guards, and he's like, well, I guess this is as good a place than ever to fall asleep. And he sleeps like a baby. Why? Because in the midst of the storm, Jesus had led Peter to a place of freedom from fear. Peter didn't have to be in control because he knew Jesus already was. He didn't have to fear because he knew that Jesus Christ was in the boat of his life. A little over a year ago, just this past week, one of our friends here at Breakaway, Nabil Qureshi, passed away. And some of you guys remember that Nabil came and spoke here at Breakaway about 2 years ago. And when he came and spoke at Breakaway, he had just found out that he had stage 4 stomach cancer. And Nabil passed away about a year ago. And they just recently released a third edition of Nabil's book, Seeking Allah, Finding Jesus. And in that book, his wife, Michelle, wrote some reflections of her journey with Nabil. And she talked about her journey with Nabil as he battled stage 4 stomach cancer. And so as she writes, she's talking about this time where they're in Houston and Nabil's receiving treatments for his cancer, but the treatments aren't helping. And he just seems to be getting worse. And here's what Michelle, his wife, wrote. She said this. She said, when I finally submitted to the fact that sovereign, good, and trustworthy God was the one in control, not me, I was set free from the hold that fear and anxiety had on me. God was for me. So regardless of my circumstances, what could be against me? I don't know where you're at in life right now. I don't know what the storms look like. And I don't know what's causing you fear right now. It might be the fear of what does life even look like if this family member is no longer in my life? What does my life look like if this boyfriend or girlfriend and I don't make it? What does it look like if I don't get into this organization? What does it look like if I end up having to live by myself next year because no one wants to live with me? I don't know what the storm looks like in your life. I don't know what that fear for you looks like, but maybe the greatest application of this talk for you might be to go home and to just go to sleep and to sleep peacefully tonight instead of laying awake, tossing and turning out of fear. Because maybe tonight you can rest in the fact that you don't have to be in control because Jesus Christ, the one who's in your boat, already is. The third way that I see God taking storms that seem pointless and making them productive is he's bringing beauty from brokenness. Just about a month ago, I was called and asked if I would officiate the funeral of one of your peers, an Aggie who had committed suicide this past summer. And so I went to this funeral and I was officiating this funeral, and the greatest desires of the parents of this Aggie, the greatest desires of this mom and dad were that the gospel would be presented at this memorial service, and I was glad to do that. And so I stood in this memorial service and I told the crowd about Jesus Christ and the hope that is found in Jesus Christ. And then I did what we do here at Breakaway, which is I gave people an opportunity just to slip up their hand with their eyes closed and indicate if they wanted to begin a relationship with Jesus Christ. And there was about 5 different people in that memorial service, a few of which were your fellow Aggies, who slipped up a hand just saying, yeah, I want to begin a relationship with Jesus Christ. And it was the greatest joy of mine to stand with the dad in his brokenness, in his heartache, and to tell him, you know what, God used your son's death to bring life. See, that's how good God is. That he never wastes pain. He never wastes hurt. He's able to take pain that seems pointless and he's able to make it productive. He's able to take brokenness and bring beauty from it. The last truth that I need you to know when your dreams or your plans and reality go in 2 totally different directions is this. With Jesus, the great calm of the sea can become the great calm of the soul today. With Jesus, the great calm of the sea can become the great calm of the soul today. The disciples run to Jesus and they say, "Do you not care that we're perishing?" And so what does Jesus do? He gets up and he says 3 words. He says, "Peace, be still." Now I need you to understand that our translations of the scriptures do not do justice to what Jesus is saying. Because in the Greek, what Jesus is really saying, it's literally "be muzzled." So Jesus isn't standing up saying, "Peace, be still." No, he's saying, "Shut up. Be quiet. Be muzzled." And as I thought about that, I couldn't help but think about this TV show that used to be on. It's called The Dog Whisperer. I don't know if you ever saw this show, but if you've never heard of it or seen it, that's okay. Let me just describe it to you. It was this TV show about this world-renowned dog trainer named Cesar Millan. And the way it would go is the show would start with like this montage of clips of these unruly dogs that would be like barking and biting people and like eating entire couches in one sitting. And then Caesar would show up to these people's homes and he would literally just step inside the door, look at the dog and go, "Shh, hey. Shh, hey." And it was crazy. Because he would go, "Shh, hey," and the dog would just stop, look at him, do the dog head tilt thing, and fall over and die. It was nuts. But I read this story and I thought about that show and I was like, Jesus is the sea whisperer. He just steps up and he's like, "Peace, be still. Shh, hey." And in that moment, the chaotic sea became calm. In fact, the text says that there was a great calm, signifying that something supernatural was taking place. You know what the interesting thing is? Is that calm sea was not the first time in the story that a great calm was displayed. No, the first time that a great calm was displayed was when Jesus slept like a baby in the midst of the storm. So when Jesus stands up and commands the sea, all that's happening is he is demonstrating externally what has already been taking place for him internally. See, the reason that Jesus was able to sleep in the midst of the storm was because he wasn't threatened by the storm. Jesus was actually already in control of the storm. And so the great calm of his soul became the great calm of the sea. Now, what Jesus wants for you is for the great calm of the sea to become the great calm of your soul. The question is, will you let him? Will you let him? Jesus might not stop the storm around you, but he absolutely wants to invade your life and stop the storm within you. Do you understand what I'm saying? He might not stop the storm around you, but he can do something about the storm inside of you. He's not threatened by your storm. He actually has more power than your storm. So whatever is raging inside of you right now, whether it's fear or anger or bitterness or heartache or loneliness or something else, the great calm of the sea can become the great calm of the soul with Jesus. I'll never forget, about 2.5 years ago, my wife and I had a miscarriage. We lost a baby. And I'll never forget that day that we found that out. I stepped into the doctor's office just in time as the doctor was starting the sonogram. And I just won't forget the doctor looking at us and just saying, "I'm sorry, I can't find a heartbeat." And that moment was devastating for my wife and I because we had already started planning. We had already started dreaming. We had already told our older kids, "Man, you're going to have a little sibling." And so we had gone down that road of having a family of 3 at that time. Talk about our dreams and reality going in 2 totally different directions. That was that moment for us. But then a day or 2 later, we found ourselves in this worship service. Kind of like this. We found ourselves in this worship service with our church. And I will never forget that the worship band started leading us in the song, "Good, Good Father." And in that moment, I wasn't expecting it, but God met me there in that moment. And God was more real to me in that moment than almost any other time in my life. because God spoke to me and he just whispered in the midst of our pain, in the midst of our heartache, he just whispered, I am with you. I'm with you. And I love you. And I care about you. And in that moment, the great calm of the sea became the great calm of the soul for me. And he wants to do the same for you tonight. I don't know where you're at tonight, but if you're here in this place and you would say, yeah, you know what, that sounds a little bit like me. My dreams or my plans in reality have been going in two totally different directions. If right now your life feels painful or uncomfortable or frustrating and disappointing, then my prayer and my hope for you tonight is that you would realize tonight that Jesus Christ is in the boat of your life. And my hope is that you would realize that Jesus Christ wants to do something in your life. He cares. He is at work. Just because you can't see him doing something does not mean he's not doing something. And what I really want you to hear is this, that with Jesus, the great calm of the sea can become the great calm of the soul for you tonight, because Jesus is speaking into this place, speaking straight to your hearts tonight with these three sweet words: peace, be still.